All right, good morning and welcome. It's great to be together again. My name's Sam, and a big warm welcome. And can you believe it? We're in the penultimate week of our summer series, looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly, how God can bring good out of all of those things. And you might be sitting there thinking, well, you know, that sounds good, but I don't think I can really believe that. That despite all the things that are either going on in the world or that maybe have gone in your life, you might look at this sort of proposition, this idea that God can bring good out of all of those things. Think, well, that sounds good for you, Sam, but I'm not sure that my life experience that I could really go for that. And I understand that. So I encourage you to look back over all of the different messages within this series, and you can catch up on our YouTube channel or via podcast app, because we've been exploring many different accounts of real people who had bumpy lives just like ours, and how they have seen God work through their lives, bringing together the good, the bad, and the ugly to tell a better story through them. And we've explored those through different biblical accounts of these followers of Jesus. So I encourage you to go back and to listen to those today, after today. But today we are going to be looking at someone else's account of how I think that can really challenge us as to what God can do through our lives. Now, just imagine if you were tasked with documenting the life of someone near and dear to you. I wonder where you might begin. Maybe you would begin, perhaps the most obvious place would be at their kind of origins, you know, their early life. Where did they come from? And in recent years, shows like this, Who Do You Think You Are, and other kind of shows have become really popular. There's been loads of blockbuster movie series going at kind of origin stories. And a real kind of fascination around where did people come from? And not just in terms of where were they born or where did they grow up, but who was their parents, who's their grandparents, what's the themes in their family line. And I don't know about you, but some of them have been really interesting as they kind of track different celebrity lives. And if you've watched any of these programs, people often get quite emotional as they look back through several generations and they discover, you know, that the hardship or some of the brave decisions in the lives of their ancestors and the situations and the challenges that they faced as they kind of unearth those different things. And maybe you know some of your family history. I mean, when we start to look in our family trees, they start to get very sort of complicated webs of different interconnections going back in time. And maybe there's bits of that family history that you know well, perhaps the more recent bits, but maybe there's bits of your family tree that no one or people don't tend to wish to talk about too much. The dodgy uncle or the skeletons in the cupboard that nobody wants to revisit those kind of murkier parts. And yet when we look at the life of Jesus, we can think, well, you know, we claim that he's the Son of God, so he must have had a really clean and a brilliant sort of family line. Surely that to have the Son of God be born must have come from a really special line of people. But as we discover, as we look through his family history, it's definitely full of good, bad, and ugly situations. And so I think there's a really interesting part there about how easily we count ourselves out because maybe of our history or our past, and yet God came to say, actually, I've come to count you in. Now, one of Jesus' core team, his disciples, was a guy called Matthew. And what we do know about Matthew is that before he met Jesus, Jesus asked him to follow him, he was a tax collector. Now, this is a pretty controversial role in sort of first century Israel. And the fact that Matthew was Jewish, he was part of their community, and yet he had sold out to their oppressors, to Rome, who is currently controlling the land and governing the land in which they lived. And so Matthew had taken on this job with the enemy, if you like, and his role was to go around and collect the taxes from his community to pay their oppressors, to fund the armies and the expansion of Rome, to contribute to the greatness of the ideals of Rome, which was really to suppress all other peoples, which was to dominate, which was to rule over. And so Matthew's friends and his community, I'm sure, would have looked pretty badly on his career choice. He wouldn't have been a particularly favoured person going round. I don't know how often they went to collect taxes, but knocking on doors and asking people for their money to give to Rome. I mean, just an aside for a moment, it does make you think, why on earth would Jesus choose someone like Matthew to be part of his team? I mean, if we were putting together a team to launch a new ministry, I'm sure we'd be thinking about who's the people who have the most reputation in the community we're trying to impact, who was seen as upstanding and a sort of righteous character, not somebody that everyone was immediately suspicious of. It's an interesting choice. I mean, why would Jesus call him? And he didn't just stop at Matthew. When you look at the other characters that Jesus called, it was a whole range of misfits and nobodies. It wasn't the people that you would say would be the A-team to put together. In fact, it was quite the opposite. And yet, in the very assembly of his team, he makes the first evidence of his real mission, that his good news is for all. His good news is available to everyone, not even those at the top who think their adherence to the laws of the time, their religious observance, their self-righteousness. He wasn't saying, well, I've just come for the people who, have got it all sorted out, who look good on the outside. He actually built his team around a bunch of people who clearly didn't have it all sorted on the outside. Isn't it interesting? And I think when we start to look at it, you see he went for these sort of qualities: availability, teachability, humility. That's what he made at the core of his team. Wouldn't it be interesting if teams were built around these types of attributes? Not performance on the outside, not who's got the highest scores or has made the most progress. See, when Jesus called them to follow him, they just left what they were doing and gave up their professions, put down their nets and went to follow him. Is that the kind of response that we can find in our own lives when Jesus calls us? That we're available, that we're willing to learn, and that we're humble. And so here we arrive. Matthew, this former tax collector. But what's interesting is, to be a good tax collector meant he must have been good at record keeping. And so now his skills are repurposed for the kingdom, because he comes to document and keep record of the ministry of Jesus. And that's what we get together in the book of Matthew that he's left behind for us. And so isn't it interesting that God can redeem even the skills of a tax collector for his own purposes? And so Matthew starts off his eyewitness account, as I expect most of us would have done, with what can be seen, I think, honestly, as a bit of a dull and confusing family tree of Jesus. I mean, I'm just being honest here. When you kind of read through some of these lists of complicated names you're not sure how to say, you don't really necessarily understand who they are, you think, well, let's just kind of skip this bit and get on to some of the interesting stories. And yet, as we start to look through them with a little bit more detail and a bit of context, actually we can see some really interesting things that Matthew is calling out here. And we've got to remember, for the people of the day, this is who Matthew thought he was recording these for. I mean, he didn't know that over 2,000 years later we would be studying his writings. So he's recording these things down for his community, first century Jews. And he would have known that there was a real keen interest in bloodlines and lineage and the ancestry of people. And knowing where you had come from and the significance of your ancestors had a big bearing on the possibilities of your life. It either opened up doors for you if you were in the right tribe or from the right people group, or perhaps it put ceilings and limitations on what you could achieve within your community. And so Matthew knew that his readers would be keen in studying these genealogies, these family trees, and perhaps looking for holes in them or problems in them to discredit Jesus. And so Matthew makes a real point of recording this family tree right at the outset of his writings. And at every turn, as we look through this family tree, there's plenty of good, but there's certainly lots of bad and ugly, just like I guess many of our family trees would have in there. And yet through all the failings, through the missteps, somehow God finds a way to bring Jesus into the world. And somehow he finds a way to bring together the foretellings and the prophecies that were there in the ancient scriptures, bring them together in the person of Jesus. How on earth? It's almost unbelievable that could be the case. It's almost unbelievable that someone who could become the king would have a background like this. And yet somehow, for me, that makes it so credible. If you were making this stuff up, you would have him coming from royalty. You would have him from the best descendants, I would have thought. And yet this shows the humanity, the frailty in which God is able to operate. So let's open up Matthew chapter 1. And it begins like this. This is a record of the ancestors of Jesus the Messiah. And just before we go on, we have to pause there for a moment because it's quite radical and revolutionary what Matthew is saying here, particularly remembering his context, who he's writing to. He identifies Jesus the Messiah. He's not just saying Jesus of Nazareth, someone you've heard of. He's saying my statement, that the family tree that I'm recording is about Jesus the Messiah. And the Messiah would have been someone well known to his Jewish readers as the foretold, the prophesied Saviour, someone who's going to come and restore the fortunes of Israel, to bring them back in their nation, in their standing in the world, to redeem and restore their kingdom. And yet Matthew is opening up saying, the Messiah that we've all longed for, I believe, this is Jesus. This is a big deal. And I wonder what's convinced him so. How has he gone from probably a traditional Jewish upbringing, becoming a tax collector, being despised by his community? What's led him to be convinced of this? I wonder through his studies of the ancient scriptures, the lens he's looking through, and then subsequently journeying with Jesus day by day. Things have aligned for him. He started to see that the prophecies, that's what's spoken about, has come to be within Jesus. Whether it's being a bystander through the miracles, through his ministry, being a bystander and observer through his arrest and his trial and his execution, and then seeing Jesus come back from the dead. It can't have just been his knowledge of the ancient scriptures, the Old Testament that we have now. It must have been a combination of that context, and then seeing how Jesus lived. And not only his claims, but also his deeds. You see, Jesus said he was a healer, and he healed. He said he was a teacher, and he was able to teach like nobody taught at the time. And he predicted his own death and his resurrection. And Matthew saw it happen. And not only that, Matthew qualifies Jesus also immediately as a descendant of David and Abraham. Now, these are two big hitters in the, if you like, the top trumps of Jewish history. Abraham, the founding father of faith, who we're going to look a bit more about this morning. And David, King David, again, really would have been a well-known figure to all of his community. And so immediately he's not only saying, I believe that Jesus is the Messiah, but I'm going to show you through this family tree that he has come from this place. And that gives him credibility. And so it goes on, say Abraham was the father of Isaac. And if you carry on reading through that first chapter of Matthew, you can read how the family tree continues to work its way down till eventually we reach Joseph and Mary and then Jesus. A complex backstory featuring men and women making all kinds of interesting choices, mistakes, coming from backgrounds who should never have been mentioned, particularly the women featuring in a family tree of someone that Matthew is saying is going to be the Messiah, was very countercultural of the time. And there's all manner of scandals and betrayal and murder. I mean, everything you could possibly want for a good, juicy bit of gossip within the family tree of Jesus. But how is it that God is able to work through even that to achieve his purposes? So we're going to pause for a little bit on the character of Abraham. I just couldn't get away from his story. And we call this message, Can I Trust God? And we're going to explore more of how Abraham trusted God. And I hope we'll discover how God is able to work through the good, the bad, and the ugly in his life to write a better story. So Abraham, we first meet him in the book of Genesis in chapter 12. And he's not called Abraham at this point. Confusingly, he's just called Abram. And he's married, his wife Sarai. Again, they both get renamed a bit later on in the story. And we first discover them that they're settled. So they're settled with their family, an extended family. And God calls to Abraham. And this is how it goes, what he says to him. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I mean, this is a pretty massive, radical call. It's not like for us today where we think, well, visiting another country, not a massive deal. You know, we can do some research about where we think we might be going. We probably know how we're going to get there. We can get a bit of a feeling for what the temperature's like, what the climate's like, what we can look at photos and pictures and start to build up a feeling of what it's going to be like to make it a bit less intimidating. But in this time, there would have been a complete unknown. And normally people would have stayed with their family in their encampment, with their community, unless there was a reason for them to go, like a drought or war, something to displace them. Otherwise, they would have remained where they were, where their ancestors had lived, where generations had been. And yet God calls Abraham to go. But where? To the land I will show you. So there's uncertainty in the call. He's not giving him all the details. And how true is that when God calls us? He doesn't give us all the steps to where we're going to go. He just says, from this very first call, I want to see that you trust me. Abraham had to leave everything he knew, take his family with him. It was a crazy call. But then came the crazy promise. I'll make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. God gave him a crazy promise of what he would do through their lives if they trusted him. Now, we don't know exactly what Abraham's immediate reaction was. But as we continue to read the story, it says the next verses tell them that they set out. on this quest. I'm not sure how they knew which direction to go in. But they set out. His immediate response was to trust God. Now, the name Abram means exalted father. And you can't, when you understand the story, you can't think of a more difficult name to have. God's called him to go, and he said, I'm going to make you into a great nation. I'm going to bless you. And yet, the one thing that they couldn't do was conceive a child. So somehow God's given me this great calling. He's even given me a name which seems completely ludicrous. He said, you're the guy who's going to be an exalted father. I'm going to bless all nations through you. And yet it seems physically impossible. From their perspective, how on earth would this happen? Even as they got into their elder years, likely past the normal age of being able to bear children. Was God making a mockery of them? As they travelled, would their other people they'd left behind, people who had travelled with them, thinking, are you sure? Are you sure? Why do you continue to trust in a God who makes a call on your life which seems impossible, which seems like there's no way that could happen? Would you just become the laughing stock? And yet somehow, Abraham, not all the time, but he managed to hold on to trusting God. And as we read through the story of that journey, even when he wanders off track and tries to take matters into his own hands, God didn't give up on him. And Abraham managed to keep trusting. I mean, how about that? The God that maybe you follow, or maybe the God that you're curious about, maybe the God you've never heard about, or the God that you're not too happy with. As we see through the story of Abraham, we see a God who delivers. Whatever the human circumstances that we face, that you face, we see a God who is faithful to his word. And that is the story of Abraham's life. Despite the good, the bad, and the ugly, God did not give up on him. Now, it took a long time for Abraham and Sarah to see God's promise start to come through. Some glimmers of hope. I mean, not just some time, I mean a long time. And we read the story, Abraham has got to 100 before they conceive their first child. I mean, imagine living most of your life with a name, with a call, in a new place. That doesn't seem to line up. That leaves you with the lingering doubt of, did we hear this right? Is God really worth trusting in? And yet it comes to pass that they have a child, Isaac. And he's featured in Matthew's family trees recording. And it's hard to imagine how they must have been overjoyed. The relief, the sense of, satisfaction that they held on, that they trusted, that they'd stayed the course, and that God had come through, that he had been faithful. The fact that they could tell their story to their children, to the children of those who had journeyed with them, who had stuck with them, their team, their community, that in fact God was a God who kept his word, who kept his promise. And now they had flesh and bones in the little boy of Isaac as a representation, a demonstration of God's faithfulness. Look, here it is. We have our something we can touch and see and hear and probably smell of God's deliverance, God delivering. And yet, there still comes an unexpected twist in their lives. You see, God's call was so big, there was still a big test to see how much did they really trust him. So we flick forward to Genesis chapter 22, and it says this. Sometime later, we don't know how long, God tested Abraham's faith. I mean, poor guy, has it not been tested enough already? You've got to feel for him. Yeah. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. I mean, let's be honest. If it was us, in this moment, you think, God, he's going to thank me. He's going to give me that pat on the back. He's going to say, well done. You've been faithful. You've held in there. You've stuck with it. Now I'm going to bless you. Not quite yet. Instead, a total shock. And if you know the story, you know what's coming. Because he says this, take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on the mountains, which I will show you. I mean, it's hard to comprehend how God could ask this of him. Having waited a lifetime, having lived through the darkness of doubts, having even tried to sort it out himself and mess things up, finally to have this promise come through, and yet God is asking him even then to give it up. But we do need a little context for the time, because it sounds shocking, and it is shocking. But in that time, many other religions practiced this awful rituals of child sacrifice. They had perverted this sense of atonement, of sacrificing something else in place of one's own wrongdoing. And so for Abraham, whilst it would have been awful, there was a cultural context to it. Or maybe this God is just like the other gods of the time. But God asks this one more thing. And how does Abraham respond? It's unbelievable. It says, the next morning, Abraham got up early. I mean, I bet he did. Did he even sleep? I don't know. What kind of night was that? He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire, for a burnt offering, and set out for the place God had told him about. I mean, can you just imagine the moments there, chopping the wood, packing the bags? I mean, we don't know who he's told about this, but one would imagine not Isaac, not his servants. They're just going with him on a hike, maybe. It carries on in the story. On the 3rd day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. I bet he was wishing he hadn't seen that. I bet he was wishing he was still further away. I think I would. When God calls us to those things that look difficult, can we just put it off a bit longer? But he looked up and he saw it. He said, stay here with the donkey, Abraham told the servants. The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there. And then we'll come right back. Let's not miss the depth of Abraham's faith. We will worship there. How on earth can giving up that which is most precious, that which you've longed for year after year, that you've got through the tears and the doubts, how can that be worship? What a model, what an inspiration to see Abraham's response. He's come to know that God, I'll give up everything for you. That's my worship to you, because you said you will bless me. So I'm going to trust you that this can be worship. And he's learned this through the journey of his life. But let's not miss this subtle bit here. And then we will come right back. He's going up there with Isaac. Somehow, he doesn't know how, but he trusts the nature of God will not be to take away that which God has promised. Isn't that incredible? What faith to trust in God. How do we translate that to our lives? We trust in the nature of God, because God's ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are beyond our thoughts. What he is able to achieve is far beyond what we can imagine or fathom or work out. And maybe we want to solve it. Maybe we want to figure out how is all these steps going to line up to achieve this outcome, and we can't see it. God says, don't worry about that. Trust in me. Trust in my nature. Don't worry about the how. Trust in me. I will work it out. How on earth can Abraham say we will come right back? Because he discovered that God, his God, was faithful. His God was good. And his God was unchanging. Paul reflects on this, on Abraham's faith, in his letter to the Hebrews. He says, Abraham reasoned that if Isaac died, God was able to bring him back to life again. Isn't that incredible? Even if he died, God wouldn't take him away. So we carry on in the story. Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders, while he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. I mean, this kid's smart. He says, we have the fire and the wood, the boy said. I mean, we don't know how old he is at this point, but I'm sure he would have been familiar with the rituals of sacrifice, of burnt offerings. So he knows what's going on here. We've got the fire for the wood and the wood, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering? That would have been the traditional sacrifice, an unblemished, a pure sheep that they would have killed and burnt as an offering. And yet, Abraham again, such faith. This is his response to his boy. God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son. Abraham answered. They both walked on together. Isn't it incredible? God will provide. I don't know how. We didn't know how at this stage. How on earth will God provide? But I trust in his nature. I trust in his goodness. I mean, maybe Abraham, maybe his lips quivering at this point. Maybe there's a frog in his throat. He thinks, why did you have to ask that question? And yet somehow he manages to dig out the faith and the trust to say God will provide. He didn't know how. He was teaching his boy, don't worry how. The God we serve, the God we trust, the God we follow, he will provide. Sometimes we have to look at our circumstances and declare that. When we can't see how, we need to say God will provide. The story continues. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, I mean, it's interesting. There's an interesting similarity here, isn't there, to the initial call of Abraham. Go to the place where I'll tell you to go. Now God's telling him another place to go. Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood in it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. I mean, at this point, you think Isaac's probably figuring out what's going on. I mean, we don't know if there's resistance or what's going on here. It sounds quite peaceful, but who knows? And then Abraham picks up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. I don't know, it doesn't say, but you can only imagine he's thinking, God, there's not long left here. You're going to come through? Did I hear you right? Sometimes God leaves it to the last moment because he wants to test how much we trust him. Because the call is so big, it needs us to trust in him. He's not trying to catch us out or trick us up. He wants to know that our hearts are for him. And yet, Abraham resolves in himself, I've seen it through my life. I can trust in God. He's the one who will provide. Here's those words echoing perhaps. God will provide. God will provide. I mean, you might be listening to this and think, well, that's great for Abraham, but that's just not me. I mean, that's too much. I couldn't trust like that. Maybe you feel like, well, I can't even trust other people like that, never mind God. And as I've discovered through my own journey of faith, that the more I've lived and put my trust in God, I can testify he has provided. Even when I couldn't see how, he's found a way. And the more I spent time with people in this community, I've seen how God hasn't let them down, how God has provided. That's our story of God who is faithful. And so here we come. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. Notice the pattern of Abraham's response. Every time God calls to him, he says, here I am. He's available. Just like the first disciples, when God called them, they put down to follow him. Abraham says, here I am. There's no engaged tone, no line disconnected, no last seen 2 years ago when I gave up on faith. Here I am. Should that be our response? When God speaks to us, here I am. Not, God, look at this disaster. Why have you called? Where are you? Here I am. Yeah. Not, God, where is your provision? Here I am. Then the angel says, don't lay a hand on the boy. Whew. What a relief, eh? Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. We haven't got time to go into these parallels. But later on, would there be a moment when a father would not even withhold his only son, who would provide him as a sacrifice for all? So Abraham respected God's power. He trusted in his character. He knew that he didn't need to understand the how, because the how would blow his mind. We can't figure out God's ways, but we trust in his nature, in his character. So it wraps up this bit of the story. Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in place of his son. God did provide. Abraham was honored for his faith. Abraham was there at the start of that family tree. He became the father of Isaac. As we look through the family tree, that rippled on all the way down to Jesus. What could your faith, what could your trusting in God be the start of? Might not be something that you live to see all of it. We're blessed to be a blessing. This wasn't about Abraham's personal journey. This was about God's big mission to reach the whole earth. all people. That's what God is calling us to be part of. Our lives are part of something so much bigger. God isn't just about testing our faith to make us stronger or better followers. It's because he wants to work through us. He wants us to be part of somebody else's journey, about the start of something that God wants to do through us. So can we trust God? Hey, it's not easy. We see that in Abraham, don't we, in his life. It's not easy. But we're inspired, I hope, by his faithfulness to dig deep, to trust in the nature of God, even when he couldn't see the how, the means, the way. And in doing so, discovered a God who is always faithful, who makes good on his promises, who will provide. So the invitation today is to trust in God. Wherever you are on your journey of faith, wherever you are, whether you're just exploring, whether you feel actually God's a big letdown, I don't fancy being part of this, whether you're soldiering on in your walk with him, can you trust God? Deep down, can you trust? God's put a big call on our life, just like the call on the life of Abraham. We're blessed to be a blessing. Let's trust him. Find something small this week that you can trust God for and see how he might provide. If you've got a need that you're longing for, trust God that he will provide. Might not be in the way you imagined. It might not be how you think it's going to work out. But trust God that he will provide. So I invite you today to trust. Trust in him. Trust in the God that we've learned about, that we've heard about from the life of Abraham. Trust in a God who's worked in so many of our lives. So I'll just invite you to close your eyes for a moment as we pray. God, I thank you for these stories, these characters of old who are so human, who are so fragile and frail just as we are. But they can be an inspiration. Yeah. Lord, how much we can uncover as we study their lives of how they put you above all other things. Somehow, in the most difficult circumstances, they held on to you as a good God. Yeah. Yeah. I pray, help us, Lord, in our journey, in our walk. When we face challenges, Lord, to trust in your nature, to trust that you will provide. Lord, let us not get hung up on how we think you should provide, or how we'd like you to provide, or when we'd like you to provide. That didn't happen for Abraham. None of those things happened for him in the time or in the manner that perhaps he would have wanted. But Lord, the call on our lives is so big, to be a blessing to others. Yeah. Lord, may we see that our trusting in you is more than just about our personal walk. Yeah. But our trusting in you could be the start of something in someone else's life, to be a blessing to others. So help us, God, to find the faith, to trust in your nature as we walk together, to encourage one another to continue to trust. Yeah. Or perhaps for the first time to take that step of trust. So we thank you, God, in your wonderful name. Amen. All right, we're going to be wrapping it up there for today. If you've got children, young people, please head over and pick them up at 12. We've got a few minutes now. If you'd like to get another refreshment, please do so. Otherwise, hope you have a great week. And just a reminder to get along to those remaining summer socials. And if there's some to sign up to, please do that. And look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.